Most people think once you hit $2.5 million saved for retirement, the hard part is over. Because at that point, you did it, right? You were disciplined, you avoided the big mistakes, you stayed invested, you won. But here's the uncomfortable truth. $2.5 million doesn't eliminate retirement regrets. It just changes what you regret. And I can usually tell within the first 15 minutes of a conversation whether someone is about to make the same high balance mistakes I see over and over again. The ones that don't look like mistakes at the time because they're rational, they're common, and they feel responsible. Until about 5 years later when the numbers still work, but retirement doesn't quite feel the way they expected it to. My name is Justin Kuntz, Certified Financial Planner and Managing Director at Pacific Wealth Management. And in this video, I'm going to walk through the 4 things retirees with about $2.5 million often tell me they wish they did differently, while it was still cheap to fix. And I don't mean, I wish I saved more. You already did that part. I mean things like, number 1, the one decision they made in the first year of retirement that quietly doubled their lifetime tax bill without them even realizing it until it was too late. Number 2, the safe income move that felt conservative but actually increased the odds they'd run out of flexibility at the exact wrong time. 3, the Medicare and Social Security timing mistake that doesn't show up on a retirement calculator but hits your monthly cash flow for years down the road. And 4, the legacy assumption that sounded loving and fair but ended up creating confusion, resentment, and unnecessary taxes for the people they were trying to help. To make this real, I want you to picture a couple I'll call Tom and Lisa. Tom is 64, Lisa is 62. They're the kind of people who did everything right. They maxed out their 401ks, they paid off the house, lived below their means, not necessarily cheaply. They took care of their kids, helped them with college, and still managed to accumulate just over $2.7 million across 401k, IRA, taxable brokerage accounts. They're not flashy, they don't feel rich, they don't look that rich, but they're at the level where one decision can swing outcomes by about 6 figures or even sometimes more. So let's walk through exactly what happens next and the 4 things that people like Tom and Lisa often wish they did differently. Thing number 1, they wish they had planned taxes before they retired, not after. Here's what most retirees do. They work hard for about 30 or 40 years, then retirement finally arrives and they say, great, now my income will drop and my taxes will drop too. Sometimes that's actually true in year 1, but if most of your money is in pre-tax accounts, traditional 401ks and IRAs, then retirement isn't the end of taxes. It's the beginning of a tax choreography that Tom and Lisa did what many couples do. They retire first, Tom retires first, Lisa planned to work 2 more years for health insurance because she liked her job, and in their minds that was a tax-friendly plan, 1 income instead of 2. But what they didn't do was map out the next 10 years, not just the next year. They didn't look at the window between retirement and the required minimum distribution age. They didn't project what happens when Social Security turns on. They didn't run scenarios for survivor status when one spouse eventually becomes single and gets hit with a single tax bracket. So what happened? They coasted, they lived off taxable brokerage accounts first because it felt smarter to let the IRAs grow. And it's a common strategy, but it's not automatically the best strategy. Then a few years later, Social Security started, then RMDs started, and now on paper their taxable income jumped right when they thought it was supposed to fall. They were shocked to realize that retirement had created a new kind of tax problem, forced income. The regret I hear most often at this level is, I wish I'd done more proactive tax planning while we had the chance. Because the best time to do things like Roth conversions isn't when you feel like it, it's when the math actually gives you the window. You can't go back and convert at 64 once you're 76 and RMDs have already pushed you into a higher bracket. You can't undo the years of ignoring the future tax hump. And one more detail that catches people, taxes don't just hit your return, they hit your flexibility as well. When your plan is overly dependent on pre-tax withdrawals later on, every big purchase becomes a tax decision. Every year becomes a tax negotiation. And retirement starts to feel way more constrained than it actually should. Thing number 2, they wish they'd built an income plan for spending, not just an investment plan for growing. Tom and Lisa had a strong portfolio, it was diversified, it was moderate, it was fine. But here's what happens at $2.5 million that doesn't happen the same way at $500,000. The dollars get loud. A normal market decline doesn't just look like a red number. It starts to feel like you're watching a kitchen remodel disappear or a full year of travel just evaporate. In Tom's first year of retirement, The market dropped super hard. Not a theoretical drop, the kind where you check your account less often because it makes you feel sick to your stomach. Tom did what a lot of smart people do when they're under stress. He tried to make his portfolio feel safer. He pulled back risk fast. He moved a big portion to stable options, and he started talking about dividends like they were a shield. And he said the sentence I hear all the time, "I'm not trying to get rich, I'm just trying not to lose money." That sentence sounds prudent, but in retirement, not losing money can be its own kind of risk. Because if you lock it into a too conservative posture right after a downturn, you can accidentally create a permanent lifestyle downgrade. You're no longer managing a portfolio, you're managing cash flow, sequence of returns risk, inflation risk, and the psychological reality of watching your money move around every day. What retirees at $2.5 million often wish they did differently is they wish they had set up a true income strategy before the first big downturn. Not just, we have bonds, not just, we have some cash. I mean, what is your real cash flow plan? Which bucket funds the next 12 to 24 months? What do you do if the market is down 20% and you still want to travel? Where does the money come from? And what does it do to your tax bracket? If you don't decide on that kind of thing ahead of time, the market will force you to decide in real time, usually when you're least emotionally equipped to actually do so. Lisa noticed something else too. They stopped spending as freely, even though they could afford it. They became cautious, not because the plan didn't work, but because it didn't necessarily feel stable. And that's the tragedy that I see. People who saved for decades to buy freedom and then unknowingly build a retirement plan that feels like a budget. So that brings me to thing number 3. They wish they'd understood how income affects Medicare and Social Security before they turn those things on. Most people know the basics. Social Security is taxed depending on income. Medicare premiums can rise with income also. But knowing those facts isn't the same thing as planning around them. So here's a scene I constantly see with Tom and Lisa sitting in the kitchen table. They're feeling good, retirement finally feels real. They decide to do something meaningful like a big trip or helping a child with a down payment for a home, maybe even buying a car. They take a large distribution from the IRA because that's where the money is, and they don't think of it as income. They think of it as it's our money. But the IRS and Medicare think about it a little differently. That one large withdrawal can create a ripple effect. It increases taxable income, it can push more Social Security into taxable territory, and it can trigger higher Medicare premiums through IRMAA. And the frustrating part is that IRMAA uses a look back, so the penalty doesn't just show up immediately. People make the decision today, then 2 years later, they get a letter and say, wait, why did Medicare just get so expensive? This is what retirees with high retirement balances oftentimes tell me. I wish I'd coordinated the timing around all these factors. Not just the timing of claiming Social Security, but the timing of withdrawals, conversions, and big one-time financial events. Because retirement isn't just about maximizing returns, it's about controlling your income story. And that story determines your bracket, your Medicare premiums, how much Social Security becomes taxable, and how much of your portfolio you get to keep versus send away quietly to the government every year. In Tom and Lisa's case, Tom claimed Social Security early because it felt like a bird in hand. Lisa planned to wait, but they didn't coordinate it with taxes. They didn't coordinate it with their withdrawal plan, and they didn't realize that what felt like a conservative choice could reduce flexibility later. At this wealth level, the difference between fine planning and coordinated planning isn't a small optimization. It can be tens of thousands of dollars over time, sometimes more. Thing number 4, they wish they had clarified the purpose of money before life forced the conversation. Here's one that surprises people. The higher your net worth, the easier it is to avoid the real conversations because you can afford to basically postpone them. Tom and Lisa assumed their kids would figure it out and that everything would be simple. Split things evenly, no drama, but then life started getting in the way and doing what life does. One child moved across the country and became very successful. The other had a few setbacks. Grandkids entered the picture, health changed, priorities shifted. Suddenly, splitting it evenly didn't feel quite as simple. And here's the part that retirees tell me they wish they did differently. They wish they had created clarity while everyone was healthy, calm, and not grieving. Not just legal documents, not just a will that you created 15 years ago. I mean clarity about intent. What is the money for? Is it purely for your lifestyle? Or is anything left over just extra? Is there a desire to give while you're living? Are there charitable goals? Do you want to help a child now but not create imbalance later on? Because if you don't define the purpose, the default plan takes over. And the default plan is usually big tax deferred accounts, big tax bill for heirs. Confusion about who gets what and why. And adult children trying to interpret your intentions when you're no longer there to explain them, that's what makes it tough. Tom and Lisa had a moment that made this really real. They were at a family dinner and their son casually joked, "Well, someday this will be ours anyways." He meant nothing by it, but it hit Tom like a ton of bricks. Not because he didn't want to leave them the money, but because he realized that they'd never actually talked about what they wanted, what they feared, and what they needed first. And when retirees say that they wish they'd done this differently, they wanted to enjoy retirement without that background anxiety of, are we doing this right? Or is this fair? And will this create problems later on? So what do you do with all this? If you're sitting there thinking, this sounds uncomfortably familiar, that's basically the point. These aren't just beginner mistakes. These are the mistakes that show up when you've already succeeded at saving, and now the challenge is converting those savings into well-designed life without getting quietly taxed, squeezed, or cornered by the decisions that you didn't realize you were making. If you want help pressure testing your own plan around these 4 areas, tax timing, withdrawal strategy, Medicare and Social Security coordination, and legacy clarity, there's a link in the description where you can book a call. Because the biggest cost at this level usually isn't just a market crash. It's waiting too long to address the things that are flexible now and fixable now, but maybe expensive later on. Thanks for watching.